Today, I'm going to talk about something that we all know very, very well. Something that we have all faced at some time in our lives. And that is procrastination. Procrastination is commonly seen as a product of laziness, but is it really? You may have felt that sometimes you procrastinate too much. You may have felt that sometimes you have goals that you want to achieve and dreams you want to reach, but sometimes, even if you have a clear-cut resolution you know you want to come to, and a seemingly flawless, crystal clear strategy that will take you there, you still aren't able to accomplish it. But why is that? Why is it that even after spending so much time creating to-do lists, elaborate work schedules, and so much money buying those handy little planning calendars and downloading organizational apps and softwares, you still end up with countless all-nighters, slapdash assignments, and last-minute submissions? You wake up the next day feeling sleep-deprived and lacking motivation, but still you are forced to push through the rest of your work, fighting the urge to straight up collapse onto your desk when the only desirable thing is to go home and take a nap. We spend so much time trying to ease this work pressure off our shoulders, but still, the deadlines hit you in the face like a cold stone wall. And that's not even the end of the sneaking rabbit hole. You know what the worst part is? It's the wave of regret that comes crashing afterwards. You see the results produced by the actions you failed to take and sit there feeling unsatisfied with yourself while crowding your mind with thoughts like, why didn't I just follow the schedule? I should have worked on it earlier. I could have done so much better. We sit there basking in our own negativity, but we fail to realize the reason behind all this procrastination. If you felt any of these things before, you may have blamed it on your lack of interest, feeling unmotivated, your misperception of time, or maybe even just pure laziness. But recently, I've come to realize that procrastination could also be a product of fear. This was the truth in my case. The truth is that I was afraid of failure. Every time I was faced with new challenges or difficulties, my first thought would always be about the different ways I could mess up or the different things that could go wrong, instead of focusing on what I could actually do. And most importantly, I was afraid of change. Before I shed some light on this, I would like to ask you a question. By a show of hands, how many of you had a favorite story or TV show growing up? That's right. I'm sure it's most, if not all of you. We all grew up with children's stories of some sort, whether it may be the tales of Disney princesses like Cinderella and Rapunzel, or the classics like Alice in Wonderland, or fables like The Tortoise and the Hare. We all enjoyed watching and reading about our favorite characters and how they overcome their struggles. We each took away an important lesson from each of these stories, and those are the lessons that we're most familiar with today. These stories represent a commonality that brings us all together. Okay, to make this more interesting, let me tell you a story. Here we go. Once upon a time, in a magical island filled with pirates, fairies, and mermaids, there lived a young boy named Peter. One night, Peter snuck into a nursery in London and met 3 children, Wendy, John, and Michael. He taught them how to fly with the help of fairy dust and whisked them away to his own magical realm. Back at the island, called Neverland, they encountered pirates, fairies, and mermaids, and even faced off against Peter's arch nemesis, the evil Captain Hook. Captain Hook was a villain with a hook for a hand and a deep hatred towards Peter. Captain Hook and his crew kidnapped the children and forced them to walk the plank one by one. Wendy had her hands tied behind her back, and she was about to jump into the water when Peter flew past just in the nick of time and caught her before she fell in. This was one of my favorite stories growing up, and I could go on and on about this, but let me get to the point here. You may have realized that I'm telling the story of Peter Pan, the boy who refused to grow up, the embodiment of eternal youth and childhood. Peter is admired for his sense of courage, bravery, and iconic sense of fun, but he too feared change. He too feared change. By refusing to grow up, he also refused to change himself. He says, I want always to be a boy and to have fun. By refusing to grow up, he refuses to step into the unfamiliarity that came with change and to grow himself as a person. This applied to me as well. The truth is that I was subconsciously shutting out change because I was comfortable being where I was. The steps forward were so far out of my comfort zone that it was easier to stay within it than to reach out and change myself in order to grow as a person and achieve my goals. It was easier to hide my capabilities than to put them out there, open to all the judgment and criticism that I knew I would receive. This feeling of self-doubt became the basis and the main reason for my procrastination. By understanding the role my brain played in procrastination, I was able to gain further insight. So, at the front of your brain, there's a region called the prefrontal cortex. It manages your decision-making abilities by overriding the limbic system. The limbic system is responsible for the emotions that you do feel. But when you procrastinate, the prefrontal cortex fails to override the limbic system, instantly flooding your brain with whatever feeling that you're feeling at that moment. In my case, that feeling would be fear. I get it. We all have responsibilities in life. Those may be as simple as just showing up to classes on time and turning in assignments in a timely manner, or as stressful and gut-wrenching as having to deal with multiple low-income part-times, the endless needs of your children at home, or even an uncooperative team at work. But no matter what, it is important to always know the reason for this procrastination. So, in the moment, it may be easier to blame your tiredness and migraines on the difficulty of the situation and just the amount of workload that you have. But recently, I realized that it all comes down to fear. It's the fear of overwhelmment, the fear of failure, and just the fear of changing yourself to meet the expectations that life throws at you. We make excuses for ourselves, saying, the situation is too hard, or I just can't do it. But this emotion of self-doubt only makes you more prone to retreating to your sphere of comfort. Similarly, in the story, Neverland is portrayed as a place of home and belonging for Peter. He goes back there every time he's met with something that he fears or is unfamiliar with. For example, when he gives Wendy the choice whether to stay in Neverland or to go back to London and finish growing up, she chooses the latter. Years later, Peter sees Wendy, all grown, matured, and different. But even after seeing how good change can be, he still chooses to return to Neverland and never grow up, all because he was afraid to process the unfamiliarity that came with change. So, when did this change in my life? First, I accepted reality. I accepted the problem that was before me, because this may be the hardest step, but it's also the most important. The second you realize the problem and accept the situation that you are in, and figure out the root cause of the problem, you can already consider it half solved. And then, I began to put myself out there, regardless of all the judgment, regardless of the criticism that I knew I would receive. I just put myself out there. As you may be able to tell, I'm probably not the best public speaker. In fact, public speaking was definitely not an area of comfort for me before. But because I decided to step into the dimension of uncertainty that comes with change, I'm able to stand here before you all today and talk about myself. I'm able to look back at the journey and see just how much I've grown, all because I decided to change myself. Okay, back to the original question. What is the reason for your procrastination? Why do you keep going back to scrolling through reel after reel and just grinding Fortnite all day, instead of being productive and doing the things that you want to do? No matter what it may be, it could be laziness or fear and anxiety like me, but no matter the cause, it's always important to first accept. Accept the problem, accept the situation, and then advocate for the change. Thank you for your time.